Hello, everybody, and welcome to episode 24 of the Titanforge podcast. My name is Dratnos. Somehow, Tettles is already just losing it down here.
Nothing happened.
Yeah, I don't know what's going on here, but yeah, we're back. Welcome.
Welcome. Also here is Trell.
Howdy.
Howdy. Top tip of the hat to you.
Howdy.
Shut up.
Okay, so we're back this week, episode 24. We're going to talk about a topic that we get asked about all the time. I don't know about how much of your stream chat, like random questions, is this one, but for me, it's a big percentage. The question is
a lot of it, yeah.
How do you get into doing high keys, right? How do you go from being somebody who doesn't do keys as part of your WoW life very much? Maybe you do your weekly 10 or whatever. Or maybe not even every week do you get a 10, into being somebody who like does a lot of keys every week, if that's what you want to do. And so that's the main topic this week. Okay. And outside of that, though, how have your weeks been? Tettles, what have you been up to this past week?
All right, well, keys are closed. It's Void Week, so we're doing bear arenas because I am a very, very bad PvPer. So
yeah, I've been seeing the Guardian Druid and run at them strategy. I've heard
works.
I've heard that the PvP community is really not happy with you, Tettles. Is that a fair assessment?
It's been on every single game.
Okay.
Tuttles is definitely the best PvPer out of all three of us too. What do you got in your Druid now, Tuttles, rating wise?
Like 2,300 in both 2s and 3s.
That's pretty good.
Yeah, that's not bad.
My greatest PvP achievement right now is almost hitting 2K in one night on Resto Druid, which I don't play, and 2 I don't heal normally, so it's really fun.
That is a testament to Resto Druid right there. And by the way, I think I'm just gonna yoink a gladiator mount playing bear. It's very easy.
Okay, yeah, that's very very silly that it's so easy. Tanks and PvP, like we don't talk very much about PvP on this show because not very much of us actually PvP all that often. But I think that the game should not be in a state where tanks can just climb up to like just run at people and then do tank, smash buttons at people in PvP.
Well, dude, whenever you're queuing into MLD and RMP, you just kind of have to bring out the dampener occasionally.
Yeah, I don't deny that there's, it's still a skill game and everything, and there's still stuff that goes on every game. I just think that, like, tank balance in PvP is something that they basically never have landed on. There's just no middle ground where tanks are fun and balanced, I don't think.
Yeah, I'm a tank player, and I actually don't want to play tank at all for any of my Essence farms to get Conflict and Stripe. I'm always playing my DPS specs. I just think it's more fun and more free.
I mean, if anybody actually cares, the way you actually play bear in PvP is you actually just off heal a ton. You literally run at them, you root them with bear charge, you smash anima on CD, and then you just off heal whoever's getting attacked, and you make sure that you're within 5 yards for Protector of the Pack. It's actually so stupid. It's so fun. I love it.
So that's what we're doing this week since keys are closed. What about you, Dreadnoughts? How many YouTube videos did you make this week alone?
I have been making daily YouTube videos, so that's been a fun project. Now, the secret is you don't actually make a YouTube video every day. You make like batches of 3 or 4 in one day, and then you schedule them to upload over a couple days. That's the little known trick to making a lot of YouTube videos. But that's most of what I've been up to outside of keying and streaming. Also, I've been leveling characters. I don't know if you guys know this, and this might be the place where we get this thing nerfed, but currently you can level characters extremely quickly in the Korak's Revenge PvP event. So, especially once you're like above level 60, it doesn't scale well at like level 10 or whatever, but once you're at like level 110, above level 60, you can start to level like 2 levels per Korak's Revenge, or 2.5 or 3 even, if it goes right. So yeah, get those full heirlooms and the draft of the 10 lands, and zip on up there. Experience gem in one of your gem slots as well. and you can get through, like, there's just huge passive XP ticks every minute in Korax Revenge. So that's a big thing that I've been doing as well. I got my Death Knight and Mage up to 120 or 120, yeah, and I'm gonna try and do it with 2 more characters later today, maybe.
Oh, your Death Knight and your Mage?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I was like, a Death Knight Mage? So what does that even mean?
Is it good from 110 to 120?
Yeah, from 110 to 120, it'll take you like 4 BGs, maybe 3.
That's insane. Yeah, I need to look at some of my casters.
I mean, Korax Revenge, it's not like Korax Revenge is a particularly short BG, right? That's the longest. It's the longest of any BGs, but it's very quick. Like, if you win Korax Revenge, you get a whole level upon winning. Like, you just get a full level bar's worth upon winning. If you lose, you get half a level, and every, like, 1 minute, you get XP ticks of, like, 30,000 XP.
Does it work with the Honor Bound Potion stuff, too?
I think so. Potion? Yeah, the Draft of 10 Lands, yes.
Yeah.
And if you there is an heirloom you can get from, like, the Gurubashi Arena that increases experience gained from Battlegrounds by 50%. That one is particularly good to combo with this. Obviously, that one, like, not everybody has that one. It's kind of hard to get. I don't have it, but if you do, it makes it even faster. For the most part, you just want to put on, like, the helmet, chest piece, shoulders and legs heirlooms, and that'll give you a lot of extra. You don't need the ones that increase your experience gained from killing monsters and completing quests, because that's not a big percentage of the experience. You just want the ones that give a flat increase to all XP. Okay, so that's yeah,
I didn't realize that.
A way to level characters that I expect they'll end up nerfing how quickly exactly you get experience from that thing, maybe, but maybe not. Maybe they just want people to be able to level up nice and quick with this fun anniversary event. I mean, it's really not like it gives you a huge head start on, the process of grinding to 120 is a small part of the process of being viable this patch anyway, so it's not like it helps too much there.
What are you trying to say, dude? You trying to say that essences are hard to grind?
Yeah, exactly. That is what I'm trying to say. Okay. Let's move on to talking about our social media presence. We have a Twitter at TitanforgeWow, where you can find our tweets and also ask us questions. We have a Discord, where it should be linked in the description of this thing, hopefully. Man, I say that every week. I actually don't remember if I've put it in the description in the past couple of weeks, so I think I have. Yeah, I have.
It definitely has been.
Yeah, it's part of, like, the big block that I copy from episode to episode. Okay, yeah, that's in there. So yeah, Discord in the description of the show. Come there, hang out with us, ask us questions there too. And we have a Patreon.
Next week.
A Patreon at the patreon.com/Titanforge. That's the place to go if you'd like to help support us with your money. Among those supporters are Paul, Gyu, Nevernude, Ahar of US Proudmore, King of Skills, VTech, Rock, Zuku, Aze, and Ja. Aze here has Grizz Best Boomy NA in parentheses next to his name. I don't know what that joke is, but
Aze is actually a friend of mine from a long time ago, aka Grizz Best Boomy NA.
Okay.
That's Tettle's Flame, and shout out to my roommate at the same time.
Why does every, like, boomkin I know have just weird names in their like Tettles makes a weird
TTV
name.
Tettles.
Yeah, TTV Tettles.
Yo, that is a great name. Please do not defame me.
Okay. Anyways, let's get to our main topic here before we lose just the entire audience that would be interested in it. So the main topic, how to get into doing keys really in the, like, 15 or higher range, especially if you're somebody who just doesn't have any kind of semblance of that going on in your gameplay right now. So why do we pick the number 15? Tettles, what's the reasoning behind choosing 15 as the number for this episode?
So by and large, I would say 10s are really, really easy, even for people who are like 430 item level. 15, the scaling definitely starts to become a little bit more difficult. You start to require a little bit more strategies. Groups also start to become fairly elitist around this point as well.
Definitely.
And then next season, you're going to get cosmetic rewards for doing 15s. There's also the meta achievement for it as well. So 15 just seems like the right number.
Yeah, I think 15 is where where it starts to be important to actually kick. Like in a 10, if you just don't kick one somebody's mantle on a Confessor and a Taltazar, like, what is actually going to happen to you? Nothing. In a 15, like, that happens, you're in trouble, right? Like, bad things are going to happen.
15 is a good benchmark for, like, you should definitely understand at least some of the mechanics to get through the key at that point.
Yeah, like, there are some mechanics. There are some mechanics that you do not need to understand to do 15s. Like, the grease guns on mech jockeys in Motherload, the earth shocks randomly from the earth shapers in Motherload. Like these are kind of invisible abilities that just do damage and only scale to be like noticeable and start one-shotting people in high keys, like in 20s and stuff. But in 15s, you don't need to know those ones, but you do need to kick Ice Spritzer on the refreshment vendors in Motherload, or bad things are going to start happening. Like if you just let all those free cast, it's not going to be a good time. If you pull, like you need to start learning some discipline about which mobs you can pull together. Because if you start pulling multiple, like there are groups of pulls that you can't combine that will start actually killing you in a 15 if you do try to combine them. And you need to start skipping like the double honor guard pack outside Volcall. In a 10, you can just blast into that thing and be fine. In a 15, you need to find a way to skip that pack. Like you're not realistically attempting to kill those enemies. So
wait, can you actually kill the double honor guard pack in a 10?
Yeah,
maybe even that. Maybe even there you're supposed to skip it. Yeah.
Shift actually told me he was in a sale yesterday on a 10, and they had to do, I think, 80k HPS on a 10 to heal that pull this week.
Okay.
So the answer is no, that is not a pull that you do.
The answer is even in a 10, you're required to skip that thing. Okay. Yeah, very cool. Great game. So, I guess there are still some big differences between a 15 and like what you see in somebody's stream in a 23. Like if you're watching one of those world best teams stream, they have these routes that are very technical. Like there's a lot of moments where they're doing some very precise things where multiple people in a group need to exactly execute something correctly for the pull to work out. And those are usually not required in a 15, right? Like you usually don't need to like skip every void with, you know, the weird different ways you can skip each void. You can usually do most of them and you only need to skip a couple. And you can usually just skip them sloppily and be okay. Like you can just do it with a battle res every time, and you don't need to do the whole avoiding getting in combat thing that we've kind of figured out how to do recently. And you don't need to like do these like intricate hard pulls of like, you know, if you've seen people pulling like Living Currents in Shrine of the Storm or Dazara Colossus in Atal Dazar, like those sorts of pulls are definitely not required in a 15.
Who would do that?
Yeah, I mean they're good. They're good pulls in high keys. Like we've come up with like this is less bad than doing the other options in the dungeon. But
yeah, I wouldn't recommend doing the Colossus and Atal pack to my friends who run high keys, let alone people just getting into 15s. It's actually just not working.
Yeah.
The Colossus sucks. The Living Current is like manageable if you know what you're doing.
They're both manageable and doable, but like they require your whole group to know exactly what the mob does, and like even then there's a chance of failure.
Yeah.
And so we start doing those pulls in keys higher, like in high keys, because we're looking at our routes and we're trying to solve specific problems that we're having, but and we're trying to come up with a way to do the dungeon in as few pulls as possible. But those are usually not super required to do a 15. Like as long as you're not pulling super duper slow in a 15, you're probably going to be fine. Okay, there are, however, some mechanics that are harder in 15s than they are in high keys. I would say that bursting, for instance, when bursting weeks are active.
Oh my god, it really is.
Yeah, like
I think bursting should have a difficult affix for healers in lower keys because you don't have as many globals to prepare for the bursting as you would in higher keys. Like in a high key, when the tank goes and pulls 12 initiates and Shrine, for example, you have like 20 seconds to get ready and prepare the whole party with HOTS if you're a Resto Druid or whatnot, so that you're ready to just burst all your healing right as all 12 die. But in a low key, you have like 3 seconds before they all die, and you don't have enough time to just ramp your healing.
Yeah, and I mean bursting, like just if you look at the damage bursting does, it doesn't scale with key level at all. So the faster the key is, like first of all, it just does the same total damage in a 15 as it does in a 20, except if you're more disciplined with not refreshing your stacks, which you're likely to be in a higher key, then it actually does more damage in a 15. And it does more DPS in a 15 because 15s are usually not running right up against the timer like 20s are. So you're doing the same damage in a shorter time. So bursting in particular, when that week is active, is rougher as if you're like over leveling a key. If you're blasting through something, it starts to get really hard, which is, you know, silly.
I would say that also 15s, you have a higher degree of likelihood of not doing the key and voice with full 5 members. Also, people not really understanding what stuff does, such as on death affixes like bursting, bolstering, sanguine.
Yeah, not playing around those abilities.
Higher chance to roll the bursting, higher chance to bolster one mob really high in HP, stuff like that.
Yeah, so these affixes that we like see and think they're good weeks in high keys, like bursting and bolstering, there's a lot of like scare and fear of those affixes from the people jamming 12s, 15s.
Tides emissaries and enchanted emissaries, I could see being very challenging for some people like who don't like have like a really good conceptual understanding of how to deal with it. Like if you look at the pack, you're like, oh, this is how you deal with this tide. But for some groups, they just don't have the tools, or they just don't know what to do.
Yeah, if you're without a druid, for instance, and there are a lot of pulls that there's no good answer for tides if you don't have a spam roots on it, or like no easy answer, like you have to actually do something complicated against it. If you don't have like Ring of Peace or Entangling Roots or Polymorph to spam on it. So yeah, those sorts of things can be like, and there are pulls that are checkmates on a 15 if you don't like. You remember the Tides double Defiler before the third boss in Underrot? Like, if you just try and brute force that thing in any key level, you're going to die. Like, there's no way to survive just Withering Curse going out on you and then a Shadow Bolt volley.
So Withering Curse can be like, you can actually move the tides while the Withering Curse cast is going off, and you can kick Withering Curse.
True.
Shadow Bolt volley actually doesn't do enough damage to where it matters.
Withering Curse is a damage taken increase though. So if you have like 5 stacks of Withering Curse on your group, then Shadow Bolt volley's
Alright, never mind. You're probably gonna die to that. All right.
It's pretty lethal. Like there's not a good way to handle that pack with just the plan being, okay, we'll try and pull the tides away and kick the Withering Curse eventually.
Yeah, never mind. Maybe that's not as reasonable as I thought it would be.
So it's a pack where you actually just have to stop, type in chat, make sure the tides does not be with the defilers, like have someone root it or have someone taunt it and keep it out of the pack, something like
yeah.
To do that in the pug.
It's definitely a way to do it. Okay, I'm gonna turn you guys up a little bit. There. Okay.
Hello. Is that better?
Yeah, I can turn you up in Discord even, real quick too. But that should be better. Okay. So the 15 ceiling as where rewards are coming from is something that there has been discussion about. I personally, the argument has been that 15s are too low of a bar to be rewarding people for, and especially the 10s coming out as a rewards tier next patch is also too low for rewards to be occurring. Tettles, what's your opinion on the level here that rewards are happening next patch?
I mean, I personally don't. I think 15s are fine. So basically, the argument for the reward structure is that if there's only going to be one set of rewards, then it should be higher as opposed to lower. But I think I'm almost of a differing opinion where I'd rather it just be like 10s as opposed to 15s and forcing people to actually have to figure out how to do 15s for their amount. If they were going to add like PvP style rewards where it's like for 10s you just get transmog, 15s you get a recolor of that transmog plus a mount, for 20s you get another recolor of that transmog plus a mount plus like a title, whether it's seasonal or permanent, it's like whatever.
Yeah, that would be like a PvP amount of support, right? Like that would be like 3 transmog sets, 2 mounts, and a title is how much PvP gets. That would be, I think, a good way to assign rewards also for M+. I do think that we have like, the 500 or so people in North America that jam 20s or whatever in that kind of community have a different opinion of how hard 15s are than most folks. Like, if you are able to successfully do 22s, then a 15 feels like a walk in the park, right? Like you're doing every mob has like less than half as much damage and health, and it's very, very easy to do when you're that well optimized. But for other people who haven't actually, done all that work of getting great at M+ and having 4 other people who've done that, I think 15 is like a actually reasonably challenging bar that
I think so too.
There's a lot of accomplishment going from 0 to 15.
I think it's probably challenging in much different ways than high keys are for us too. It's hard to like put ourselves in those shoes, but we were all there at one point or another. So I think like a lot of it is just group management and like keeping everyone on board, like making sure polls are small enough or that everyone has enough knowledge of a larger poll, and if so, you can do it. But
and that's where it comes in, is the barrier to entry of Mythic Plus is heavily gated behind knowledge and like understanding of what packs do, what mobs do, what needs to be kicked. stuff like that is by far the most critical piece of being able to do higher level keys and being able to do 15s. Like I watched Dr. J deplete an 11 the other day. Like, all right, 11 KR. KR may not be the easiest dungeon, but like it just goes to show that like whenever you're pugging LFG with no voice, even people who placed third at global MDI can deplete an 11.
Yeah, it's, you know, you're like a huge difficulty is getting the rest of the group like on the level you need, right? Like finding the people for that and playing and having them want to play with you. Excuse me.
Bless you.
Bless you.
So that is like, I think one of the unseen challenges is like, it's not just pressing your buttons, but it's actually assembling the people to do that. Okay. So we'll talk about those exact difficulties and our plans for like what we would do if we were a new player, trying to get into these things. But first, we have our new segment, Tip of the Week. My tip of the week is that, depending on when you're hearing this, if you're hearing this live, it's not for a couple days, but if you're listening to this in podcast form, the Battleground bonus week is coming up. It's going to be this, like the following week after we recorded this, so in a few days from when we're recording this. And that is going to be your best time to grind out Blood of the Enemy and Sphere of Suppression and Artifice of Time. So if those are things that you are interested in doing, it's going to be like, this is an efficient time to do it. Now, the strategy I've been using to get Blood of the Enemy on my characters has been just focusing on doing first wins of the day. I do my first win of the day in random BGs, random epic BGs, and I also do the Brawl whenever the Brawl's good, which right now it is. And those all come with a pretty hefty chunk of honor, but only once per day. And then the kind of passive honor from doing the BGs is fairly low. But if you're interested in getting it all done in 1 week, next week, that passive honor is getting a 50% bump. That's pretty substantial. So you'll be able to do it in a lot less time. And you'll come out of the week with a nice powerful essence, especially if you're looking for Sphere Suppression, you don't need it to be rank 3. If you're a tank, you do not need Sphere to be rank 3 generally. But if you're a DPS player and you want to be playing with Blood of the Enemy in the major slot, rank 3 is night and day from ranks 2 and 1. So you need to get all the way up to rank 3 if you're going to bother. Otherwise, just don't worry about it and use a different essence.
Okay, so hypothetically, if you don't even have Blood of the Enemy or rank 1, can you actually grind honor?
Yes.
For rank 3.
The achievement is all you need. You need the achievement. You need to have gotten rank 1, but you can do rank 1 later. So the main thing, like rank 1 requires a PvP island, which is kind of hard to find sometimes. But you can do all the work towards rank 3 and get that Battlefield Tactician achievement, and then go do your PvP island if you want. If you want to do it in that order, that's fine.
Okay, well, the only one I have done is the PvP island.
Okay, yeah, the other 2 you'll get for free along the journey to. What kind of you just do PvP islands for fun? Do you just do your weekly cap in PvP islands?
I looked at Blood of the Enemy and I was like, oh yeah, maybe I'll do this. And I went and did a PvP island and I was like, fuck, I don't want to do Battlegrounds. Interesting.
My experience is like, I just have these characters where I'm just like dreading the prospect of figuring out how to do a stupid PvP island on them. And then everything else is like, you can at least just queue for, and you know, it doesn't matter too much if you win or lose 5 in a row. But if you lose 5 PvP islands in a row, man, like, not that I've ever lost a PvP island, mind you, but like, it's, you know, the queue time is not high, or is not short for those things. Yeah. THD's in the chat. Yeah, I did some PvP islands with him, and he played Fire Mage in one of them with Crit Brew, and I'm like 30 yards away killing some crabs or whatever, and I noticed I just get bloodlusted, and I literally turned around and looked to see what was happening, and there were 2 Dead Alliance corpses like 3 globals later. They're just both on the ground. He'd taken like the Flash Fire brew on a Fire Mage, and that Crit Brew is extremely broken for them, so yeah, great competitive format, PvP Islands. Anyways, that's my tip of the week. Tettles, what's yours?
Cross-Realm Mythic's been open for a little while. Probably, like, especially if you're geared, now would probably be a decent time for you to jump into it if you're like 435, 440 item level, wanting to start actually killing Mythic bosses, getting Mythic loot, maybe joining a Mythic guild later on in the patch, maybe not. Now would be the time that I would say you jump in, try to kill the first 3 bosses because they're all relatively easy. Yeah,
the time, like, it's easy to do, and if you can kill the first boss, you can kill the next 2 almost for surezies. Actually, I think Blackwater Behemoth is maybe the hardest one of the 3 in like a low geared pug.
I think it depends. If you have only melee, then yes, it would be.
I don't know. Blackwater Behemoth has like the opportunity for people to not kill fish or like kill the fish at bad times and like swim badly, those sorts of things. Not do the soak well. So like there's big moments where people can fail in big ways, but on the first boss and the third boss, you can brute force it a lot more easily. Like just the 20% extra healing and gear we have from a couple months ago is much more helpful at covering mistakes on those fights than on Behemoth, I'd say.
Yeah. Trollbear may have gotten eaten by the shark, but I did get the Leviathan's lure. So
you got what?
Trollbear did get eaten by a shark. Yeah, it was wonderful to see. This was I did the first 3 on my Demon Hunter last week on a controller as well. That was a really good time. Blackwater Behemoth is the hardest boss to play on a controller, let me tell you, because navigating 3-dimensional movement on a controller is not easy to do. Not with my setup, at least. I needed a better controller binding, scheme probably.
Anyways,
all right, Trell, what is your tip of the week, leading us into our main topic?
My tip is it's about doing 15. So if you're the natural leader out there in any Mythic Plus group, which someone kind of tends to fall into that role, and it's usually the tank, but DPS players can do it really well too. But if you are that person, don't be afraid to delegate some calling or responsibility to other people in the group, especially on bosses or pulls where you have the hardest job. If you're the tank, for example, on let's say the second boss of Shrine, you have a lot of work to do with like keeping the bosses out of the runes and kicking yourself with your short little melee hands like a brewmaster has, and your ranged DPS are over there just sitting on a cliff doing nothing. And if that's the case, then they should call kicks for sure, right, Tuttles?
Okay, that's what I'm talking about.
Tettle's Boomkin brain does not comprehend a kick order.
I do. Wait a second. Hold on.
Actually,
stop.
He did start doing that.
It's just
Stop.
like
I call it kicks.
me have solar beam once every 3 years. Me press that button then, and that's the entire time that I interact with kicking.
I mean, just because I don't have focus kick bound, it doesn't mean that I can't call other people to kick.
Yeah, I agree though. I think that boss in particular is one that you want somebody else to call. Even like any trash mob where it needs to be kicked every couple seconds, I think it's good usually for a DPS to call those. Something
Absolutely.
like the first mobs in King's Rest, for instance, like the witch doctors there. Really good one to make sure that people are calling those also.
And at this point in the expansion, in high key groups, I've noticed that pretty much everyone knows what kicks are mandatory, and they all kind of help call them as it goes. Whoever has the most dominant voice kind of ends up leading that. But I've sometimes seen like myself and 3 DPS call the kicks on 2 witch doctors or 2 defilers and underrot at the same time, and I'm like, oh hell yeah, everyone's on board.
Yeah,
it's a good sign.
Now, when you're doing a 15, you're not going to necessarily be in this place, right? You might be doing a key where you're not super sure on which kicks are mandatory either. Like that's something that's good to learn, but you might not be super sure. And the rest of your group definitely, like if you just say somebody's name or whatever in voice chat, they might not know what you're looking for them to do. So those are going to be times where you might want to do it as you're going into before you start the pull. You kind of make some assignments, call things out, and be like, okay, Trell, kick the Withering Curse. Instead of, in high keys, we just go like Trell. Tettles.
Yeah.
You just say somebody's name and they do the thing. Right. That's not
in a lower key. I'd for sure say Tettles kick next boss kick on the first boss on the for example.
Yeah. You go like Tettles on boss, Stratos on ad or whatever. And,
so that means I kicked the ad on accident and say oops.
Yeah, I've seen that clip. Okay. Yeah.
So like that. I mean, okay, so what if you don't have voice then?
Yeah.
Like, what if you're not in voice with the people? What would you do there?
So if you're not in voice, you probably are not going to get a lot of the like sort of important kicks, like just mobs that cast like wildfire on your group or whatever. Those are probably just getting through a lot more often. You can probably only really assign some of the most important kicks, but it's just whatever you have to. You can type stuff out. You can, before the dungeon starts, you can like set up people to be like, hey, look for the triangle marker and kick that, and then you can like either have an auto marker, which is a useful weak aura you might be interested in. There are weak auras that mark mobs automatically for you. You can just search on the weak aura site for auto marker and find one that you like, and then configure them usually in custom options as well. So you could do that, and you can be like, okay, look, my auto marker marks things with circle, star, and triangle. So rogue look at circle and DH look at star, and I'll try and get triangle if we pull enough mobs that there's a triangle kick, and just kick the most important cast on that mob. You could do that. Or before each pull, you could manually mark mobs and be like Rogue Star, and then just go in and pull. And that sort of thing helps also.
It's got to be the best way to do it without voice. Before the dungeon, just put it out there, like, you watch for this marker, you watch for this marker, and then you can either mark yourself or use auto marker, like Dratna said.
Yeah, when there's no communication, there's a lot more kind of guessing about who's going to handle what in each pull. So in those spots, trying to be like consistent and predictable with what you're going to do is nice as well. Like if you just always instantly kick every lasher and underrot, like as soon as it starts coming in, and you just kind of make it clear that that's what you're up to, then maybe people will stop like also looking at those. But it really, it kind of just, it's a lot worse. It's a lot worse than voice. There's not a good way to do these dungeons without voice unless you have done them in voice multiple times with the group and everybody knows what the pull are. Like at this point, we could probably do an underrot without being in voice. If we ran it a couple times in voice and then we ran it without voice, it would probably be fine. Like you could do many of the MDI pulls without voice even after you're like, a lot of MDI runs, I bet, are pretty low on actual voice comms.
It's actually pretty quiet because we've done the poll so many times.
Exactly.
We're all just focusing really hard on getting our responsibilities.
Unless something goes wrong and you need to improvise, there's just like people know what they're doing. But the kicks have been long predetermined. Like the only time something is actually called out is if something weird is happening, right? Or if there's like something specific that a couple times per dungeon is particularly hard. Anyways, that's not something that you'll run into at all in a doing 15s type setting. I think there should be an abundance of calling things out in a 15. Like just call out the kick every time. I see these. I've been in these groups even. They've not been 15s where like we do like the last boss in Shrine of the Storm. You know how you pull the trash pull while you're fighting the last boss, and we've just done like okay, A and B kick the two casters, and then C and D kick them, and then just nobody said anything, and like. The kind of assumption is, okay, A and B are just going to kick their same targets again on the third cast, but in practice, just one of those casts went through because nobody said anything, and the person didn't realize that they're supposed to kick that. So,
Okay, so would you say that voice is mandatory for doing 15s?
No, it's certainly not mandatory. But if you are trying to do 15s, voice will be like 5 times. Doing it with the plan of being in voice is going to be like 5 times faster than doing it trying to pug without voice. I'd say.
I think you definitely can do it without voice, though. It just takes a lot more predetermined.
Most of this episode is going to be us saying like you should do this. Note that you can do it without doing the things we say. Like you can brute force 15s. Like if you just smash your head against the content enough, you will eventually get the 15s done. Like that's something that you can do without needing to do anything specific. But we're going to offer you the ways to do it faster, and voice I'd say is the biggest one out there, like being in communication with your group, even if you're LFGing, right? Like even if you are using the group finder system, just getting in Discord after that, and it's kind of up to you. Like you might be in a group where just if nobody said anything, they're just going to pull you, they're just going to go into the dungeon without joining a Discord. But if you post a Discord link, people will go into that Discord and talk with you. So do that,
this is how important I think voice is, and this just goes to show how much it helps in Mythic Plus. Like sometimes my brain just doesn't put 2 and 2 together in the moment, and if I almost get one shot by something I wasn't expecting, I'll just be like, and that alone lets my group know that I'm in trouble, and then probably several people will do something to try to save me.
Yeah, I hear and I'm like gouging something. I'm
the panic. Yeah,
I'm stunning something.
I'm treasing. I'm typhooned the bombs.
Yeah,
what's happening?
Or sometimes you hear and like it means that somebody's actually about to like body pull a patrol or something, and that is also something to watch out for. But yeah, usually if I hear somebody do that, I'm immediately just gonna look to try and like stop mobs from doing something for a couple seconds.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, let's talk about this process though, because if you're starting out, if you're not somebody who has grouped with anybody for keys before, you're probably going to be doing it through in-game LFG, right? That's probably the way that you will be getting into keys for the most part. Like there are some shortcuts, there are some sneaky quick ways to doing high keys, but the most common way is you're going to open up your group finder and you're going to look in the dungeons tab and you're going to find like, a group that says plus 13 and below it is like Waycar's Manor, and you're just going to like apply to that group and see if you get invited. So, Tettles, what are the ways, what are the things that you should keep in mind if you're going to try and level up this way?
If you're just solely applying to groups, not making your own, you need to first realize that people are probably going to be elitist and look at your Raider.io score. So you better, if you're going to apply for a 13, you definitely should have all of your 10s done. You would hopefully have like at least an 11 of Waycrest done, just to prove to the group that you can do that. And then you probably need just a little bit more of an accepting group, because by and large,
like
I would say,
they will. It's not that they'll like. There will be some Raider IO scores that they won't invite, but there will definitely be like you can apply to a 13 with all 13s timed, and they will still take somebody who has all 14s timed and applies to that same group. Like, and like that person just has 300 extra Raider IO score on you or whatever, and they'll probably just invite, like, all other things being equal, the points of information that you get about somebody when they're applying to your group are their item level and their Raider IO score. So
and their class.
And their class. Yeah. So people will synthesize those 3 points of information and invite the person who does the best on those metrics. And it's not like there's way more people applying to groups than there are groups, right? So you're going to get elitismed out of groups pretty often. So that means that you're going to have to apply to a lot of groups, right? Or make your own group. Making your own group is a huge cheat code to doing this. It's like a little bit more annoying to do. You have to do some coordination, but then you'll be on the good side of there being way more people applying to groups than there are groups. If you make just a random 13 group, you'll just get some good applicants to that key, and you'll be able to look at them, and you'll be able to be the person picking the random 3K person who applies over the 1.5K person. So that's a really I'd say that's a big way to up this is make your own groups instead of trying to apply to groups. Is that's the strat. Okay,
I would agree. So you don't think, so people believe that Raider IO score is toxic, but I think we're probably all under the same assumption that Raider IO score is just, like you said, a synthesis of the information that people can gather, trying to use it to best determine should they invite this person to their group, right? I think we're all under that opinion, right?
Yeah, I mean, it's literally just a metric that shows how high keys you've done. Like, there's not... I fail to see how, like, having that information be available is not just good. I don't know, like...
It's just another perspective, because, like, it's the same thing as when someone links me a cutting edge achievement from Raid, but using that to try to get into a Mythic Plus group is like, okay, they have a potential to be at this level of play. They know how to do their damage. Probably, they at least have their CC or abilities on their bars, hopefully. But then Raider IO shows like a little more Mythic Plus knowledge usually, unless it's like 10 to 15 range would be kind of iffy. Like they could have just been doing those for completion instead of like really trying to push their keys. But it's just at least another frame of reference for how good they possibly could be.
Yeah, it's like people can be bad with good Raider IO score, and people can be good with no Raider IO score. Like, those are both possible, but all other things being equal, the person with the higher Raider IO score is likely to be better than the person with the lower IO score, right? So, given that that's the only information you get, you're just going to take the person with the highest score, and that makes sense. And doing that is going to make your group succeed more often, as long as you do it smartly. So that is worth noting. Now, we also talked about class. That's something we'll talk about more later. For now, I really just want to stress that, like, patience is if you're not used to spending 20 minutes trying to actually find a group, or 30 minutes trying to actually find a group in LFG, if you're used to just like Raid Finder or whatever, where you can just click the button and it will do the work for you, and you don't actually have to like apply to a bunch of different groups and get denied a bunch of different times, that is something that is likely going to be part of your process, at least while you're starting out. So don't give up on it from there. Like, you need to get accepted to one group, right, to be able to start keying. You don't need to... It doesn't really matter how many decline you first.
It's like dating.
Exactly. Okay, now there are some fast tracks. There are some fast tracks to success here. One of them is your guild. Depending on which guild you're in, you may have a much easier way to get into keys than doing it in LFG, right? Like, if you have guildies who do high keys, and your friends in Raid or whatever, or you're just friends in guild chat even, that is a really likely way to get into high keys for you. Like, that, just attach to that person that is in your guild and willing to do keys with you, and just ride that person up to a reasonable score, and then you're chilling from there. You'll make friends with their friends, and that's the way to do it.
That is absolutely how it goes sometimes. Sometimes you'll be like, oh, we don't have a tank, a healer, a rogue online. Hey, I raid with such and such, and he's, I don't know, pretty good in raid. I'm sure he can kind of do it, right? You're like, yeah, whatever, get him. And then if he does well, then he gets invited back to the other groups, and he gets added by people on B tag, and then you just get invited. That, I would say that is the only fast track though, and beyond that, you have to be patient.
Yeah, I mean, IRL friends or whatever, or like just friends in some way that are, even if they're not guildies, also works. But it's basically guilds are the juice. That's the way to get up there nice and fast.
It's easier to make a connection with them. That's actually exactly what I did with Morning back in Legion. He didn't do keys at all, and I just raided with him, and I was like, he's a pretty consistent player and doesn't always just talk about his damage. He probably thinks about mechanics. So I'm going to invite him to do keys, and we're still doing keys 2 years later.
Yeah, there's an active process as well. At the end of every key you do, you should think back and be like, okay, which of these people would I like to play with again? And add those people to your friends list. Like, add those people to your friends list. Let them know that you want to do keys again. It's annoying. It's social interaction. That's tough to do, but it's a huge way to speed up this process also. And having a nice friends list full of people, like you'll just start getting whispers randomly if you're good. And part of it as well is like the better you play, the more people are going to be interested in playing with you again. So that is like a focus on your own play is always going to be helpful too.
I think I realize why I don't get whispers now. All right, thank you.
Yeah. at Tuttles. I don't know. I mean, also like it depends on the people you add, right? But like it makes it easier to just kind of start building a network, and that's what you need, so that you're not actually looking at LFG to find keys, but you're doing it with buddies or doing it with friends and friends of friends. The more people you're on the friends list of, the more often you're likely to get invited. When they're just in a group and they're like, okay, we need a rogue, and you're just a rogue on somebody's friends list, you're likely to get whispered in that spot. If you're like, they're going to go down their list of friends and find the best rogue that's online and then ask them. And then when that person says no, they're going to ask the next person. And then eventually they get to me and I get to key if everybody turns it down.
But very quick distinction, that is not the fast track. That requires a lot of doing Mythic Plus leading up to that point before you start getting whispered from like people on your friends list. It requires you getting higher score, probably. It requires you building that network, that extensive network that Dreadness was talking about, and writing the coattails of people who are carrying you occasionally.
Yeah, I mean, you're like, if you do 30 keys, there's going to be a best person in those 30 keys who's quite good, and who, like, if you can get up to doing keys with them and their friends, is going to be a big jump for you, right? So just find those few best people, and you're just kind of slowly trying to climb the ladder, right? And ditch your worst friends and make friends with new better people, and then ditch your new worst friends and make friends with better people, and keep going up that way. That's the strat.
Unfortunately, it definitely does happen that way a little bit. Like there are several friends that I don't play with anymore because they kind of lost interest in keys. I had a lot of fun with them, but you do have to find more and more people, and it is a big social part of the game is Mythic Plus.
Yeah, I mean, you're trying to climb from doing like the keys that 90% of the population can do to the keys that 3% of the population can do, right? So just you're going to have some friends that are not going to be interested in making that jump with you, and you can't keep keying with them if you're going to try. Like, you can't keep trying to bring those people with you to along the way up, even no matter how much you like them. Like,
well, that's more for pushing beyond 15s, even though. I would say for
applicable at every level.
I would say that it is applicable at every level, but at the same time, doing 15s, I feel like if you put enough time into it and you have the correct item level, everybody can obtain doing a 15.
Right, but I mean, if somebody is putting in actually no effort, it's gonna be like easier to go without them than to bring them with you.
Right.
And
don't carry people who are bad.
Right.
TLD.
Like there's always a way to do it better, right? Even in a 15, if you're just trying to do a 15, you could be trying to two-chest it and make yourself feel good that way. So you want someone who's going to go for that, rather than just...
Yeah. Okay. So we talked about Raider IO score. Item level is a big thing as well. Just like the higher your item level is, the easier it's going to be. So like finding those mythic pugs that Tettles was talking about, getting high item level gear is going to make you a more attractive applicant in the LFG group finder as well. It's going to just increase your damage as well to have more gear and increase your health. That's a useful thing. The final characteristic we talked about that people see when you apply to a group is what class you're playing. And this is a massive part of the formula as well, especially like getting into 15s, getting into higher than 15s. People are elitists in Group Finder, right? If they see 2 people apply to the group, and they're usually going to be looking for at least 1 rogue in the group. There's going to be specific classes that they're not interested in inviting in specific roles. Now, this can be hard if you are trying to raid on a character, right? Like if you are, I don't know, a warlock in raid, for instance, and you're trying to also key on that character, that's a difficult thing to do, right? It's going to be difficult to get your 15 achievement as a warlock compared to if you happen to raid on a rogue, right? So an option there is to play a second character to do keys. If your raiding main is 1 character and that's not something you can change, playing a different character in keys is a way to have more access to groups. It requires some gearing up, and that sometimes takes a while, but it's a way
definitely doable, though.
Yeah, and
I think you're doing that this tier on your rogue, right?
Yeah, basically, I don't raid on my rogue outside of a Mythic Plus raid, basically, and that is all I do to key is play that rogue, basically.
I think it's season 2. I raided on my monk exclusively, but I did Mythic Plus on warrior, and I only had killed 1 Mythic boss on my warrior that entire tier to get a shield, and that was it. And I could still do high keys on that too, and it just wasn't quite as optimized as it could have been, but that's fine.
Yeah, I mean,
alternatively, you can play other specs of your class. Like, it may not work for Warlock, but if you are a Disc Priest in main raid, you could play Shadow. Shadow's good. If you're a Restoration Shaman, you can play Ellie. Ellie's good.
Yeah, there's ways to be. Although even those specs, like I don't know how easy it is to pog on Ellie Shaman compared to rerolling to one of the popular melee DPS specs, for instance. Probably not too hard, but I feel like there's elitism even against some of the good specs that are underrepresented. Like Ellie Shaman in particular.
It's better than playing Disc or Resto Shaman, right?
Certainly you'll have an easier time than getting invited on those specs, yeah, but it's not going to be like there are some specs that are just tickets to getting invited really quickly. Those specs are like Prot Warrior, Brewmaster Monk maybe, although even that I think the message isn't even out to the wide populace that's a great spec right now in keys. So yeah. I would say Prot Warrior is the tank to get invited on real quick. Resto Druid is definitely the healer to get invited on real quick, and then like rogues, DHs are the ways to get invited as DPS real quick. And even the other good DPS specs, they might already have a ranged person in the group. So if you're playing like a fire mage, there's a lot of groups that are maybe not going to invite you if they already have a ranged or a balanced druid or whatever, even though those specs are good. So if your plan is to exclusively LFG, I would say that being on one of those specs, like it might not be worth re-rolling, but if you're choosing which character to do keys on, do the one that will get invited most easily.
And I would say that is for doing LFG. People ask me all the time, like as a balance main, I get a lot of balance people in my chat. They ask me what they should be looking to do. And sometimes the best advice I can give is for them to actually play Restoration Druid, because it is the easiest way to get invited to a group. Balance is good. Balance is actually one of the top tier DPS.
Yeah.
You're not going to get fucking invited to an LFG group. As sad as it is people look at the MDI as like the pinnacle of what is the meta for Mythic Plus. And if you're playing anything other than that, you're going to have a rough time. And that is a sad state of affairs, but it's always going to be like that. And it really just kind of depends on where your priorities lie. If you only care about playing your one specific class, like I only care about playing Moonkin, sorry to say. I have my very geared Demon Hunter that I just really don't want to play that much in keys. I enjoy doing alt keys, but that's neither here nor there. I just took season 2 off because reaping was not good for Moonkin. So sometimes you just don't play. But it depends on where your priorities lie.
Yeah, it would be nice if there were, people who were involved in making the game who, chose for you to not have to make that choice. But that's not the world we live in, right? You have to
realistically.
You basically have to choose between playing the game on a spec you don't want to play it on, or not playing the game. The
most important element here is that people hate the feeling of being left out. Like, by and large, if you feel left out or you feel like you're being just like disregarded because you're playing a lesser spec, you're going to feel worse. And at the end of the day, the easiest way to not feel disregarded is to actually be playing a Fodom spec. Is as shitty as that sounds.
Yeah, I mean it's like what the strat is like they're the best specs often for a reason. In some cases, like the tank meta in particular, I'd say that the tank meta is actually fairly balanced. They're all really close.
I agree.
And I think you can succeed in 15s with any tank. So like that there, it's kind of annoying that the community perception is so against Guardian Druid or whatever. Like when Guardian Druid is definitely totally fine for keys. Like it's not tiers below. It's not like huge steps below the best specs. I struggle to say not tiers below because I do think I made a tier list where there were multiple tiers separating it from Brewmaster, but not that like it was. I think I had all them in C or higher, which is like the tier where you can easily do stuff on. But for some roles, like the range DPS case or the healer case, there are actually like ones that you will have a night and day difference playing the some specs versus the others. Okay, one strat is if you are a raider and you're trying to key on a secondary character, bringing your secondary character to farm is a useful thing to do. Your guild is likely to be willing to help you gear up your alts, especially if you kind of like don't tell them and just whisper for invite on your alt or whatever like that. That's a good way. You just sneak into those first couple bosses on your alt and then you refuse to log over until you get to like Orgazoa or whatever you need to be on your main for. That's a big play you can make to gear your alt.
This is also how people sneak in sub rogue and keys. They just don't tell me they're switching specs.
Yeah, sub rogue is a strat that's based entirely on people not noticing. Yeah. Yeah, that's the way to do it. Okay. So yeah, we talked about that. Outlaw Rogue, Havoc Demon Hunter, Resto Druid, Protection Warrior. Those are the specs that you'll have the easiest time getting invited on to keys. Now, one thing we also didn't talk about is if you're playing like Subtlety Rogue, if you're actually trying to do Subtlety Rogue keys, you're going to have this awful thing where you get invited to groups and then people are going to inspect you and kick you. So be very careful playing the less popular versions of like the less popular DPS specs for certain classes. Like if you're, we have a question about this that we'll cover later, but like if you get invited as a DPS shaman and then your enhancement, there's a chance of being kicked at that point, right? Like people are expecting elemental maybe. People are expecting outlaw when you're getting invited to groups as rogue, and despite the fact that assassination is also very good, they're expecting outlaw. So if they see something other than that, there's a chance you're going to get kicked. So be careful of that.
And honestly, those things don't matter at that level, but that's just the real situation and how people are likely to act, unfortunately.
And 15s is when you will start to see, like, okay, I'm going to show some statistics now. Here's Raider.io. Here's where you can see the Mythic plus the melee spec population at all levels of keys. You can see there's a lot of representation of a lot of different specs here. No spec is really all that underrepresented except for like survival and subtlety. Like everything is on this chart here. At least somewhat. When you filter this to level 15 and up, all of a sudden it's dramatically different, right? Like all of these less popular specs go way down in representation. Havoc, Outlaw, Assassination all spike upwards. And then when you filter this, if you filter this to like 20 and up, it's just, there's a couple of mountains and huge nothings on one of these specs.
I have never actually looked at this before. Holy shit.
Okay,
so this is the point that we're trying to make is that, okay, yes, it fucking sucks that you really want to play Feral Druid. And dude, Feral Druid is absolutely viable to do 20s. I'm
yes,
100%
you can definitely
sure.
key on Feral. Like it will work in a 20, but I mean, it's not... It's doing the same things as a rogue, but you're not bringing a shroud, so you still need another rogue. So like it makes the group comp a little harder to work out, but it definitely does things, and you can key a 20 on any of these specs, I promise.
Yeah. So unless you're making the group, you are going to be hard pressed to be invited. That is 1,000 times more true whenever you're using LFG. That it is going to be so hard to get into a group, and that's why I would 100% recommend actually making the group yourself. Literally every single.
Especially like if you are not playing the Outlaw, the Havoc, the Resto Druid, or the Prop Warrior, I think making the groups gets even more important. If you're playing Havoc Demon Hunter, you probably don't need to make all that many groups because you can just apply to things and you're going to be okay. Like people will invite you and they will not kick you. when you get invited. But if you're playing one of these other specs, you need to be that leader to key at a reasonable rate. And this is a similar trend. Like you can see this in healer as well. Like in healer, you can see every healer spec above 10% representation. When you look at the all runs, filter this thing to 15 and up, and Rest Druid climbs up to 40%. Filter it to 20 and up, Rest Druid is up above 60% now, and all of the other specs except for Holy Paladin are below 10%.
Man,
there it is.
As the keys get higher, this effect gets more and more pronounced. And the thing is that, like, even though this is only 20s and up, even though the representation is more balanced at 15s and up, groups invite the groups invite taking this to an even bigger extreme. Like they will invite Resto Druids at a ratio higher than 63% compared to the other specs.
Dude, they will only invite Resto Druids, and they will take like Fodom specs at like 10 item levels lower.
Yes, and I mean the thing is, like, if you honestly ask me if a Resto Druid 10 item levels lower was better than like a Holy Priest, like yeah, it is. Like item levels don't affect how effectively you can cast Entangling Roots, right?
Well, okay, Resto Druid versus Holy Priest is not fair. Resto Druid versus Holy Paladin.
Holy Paladin, okay, yeah. They're the 10 item levels. Although even there, like a Battle Res and an Entangling Roots, like that it doesn't matter how many item levels you have for that to be better.
Sure, but what we're trying to say is not that you should persecute against other people who are playing less viable specs, but know that if you are going to pug through LFG, you're going to have to deal with this by like in spades. It's going to be rough.
Make your own groups.
Be patient. Be patient. Be patient. Be patient.
Yeah, I have a lot of friends that make 15 groups, and they're playing the off meta specs, and so they'll only invite people that are off meta just to fight the normal way of doing things. Right.
This is
because
yeah,
people actually get to do keys that way, and you can do 15s with all non-meta specs. In fact, I think we did a 20 a couple weeks ago with like Disc Sub, Arcane Mage, and I was on my main, but I think we had one other non-meta spec.
I was playing Demon Hunter.
And Tettle's Demon Hunter counts as off meta. Like Demon Hunter's a good spec, but Tettle's Demon Hunter counts as off meta.
That character is 445, man. That character's done 21s.
Yeah. Okay, yeah. So that's I guess trying to just to make our point with statistics though is like that it's going to be an easier life for you if you're doing it with friends as well. You can do the off-meta stuff a lot more easily. Like when you have a group of friends, you can play an off-meta spec. If you are in a community and you've like been keying with people a lot, you'll have an easier time. Although even then, if you switch mains from like Rogue to Fury Warrior, all of a sudden you're gonna have some former friends start dodging you like a lot. It's gonna happen. You're gonna whisper people for keys, and they're gonna be like, "Are you on your Rogue?" And you're gonna be like, "No, man, I switched to Warrior." And they're gonna be like, "I'm busy,
dude. I'm lagging." Dratnos gets invited to a key. Everybody assumes that you're inviting Dratnos as Rogue. Dratnos shows up on like some like random thing.
Dude, or when Dratnos when I was playing Shaman and my Rogue was under geared, like it was a lot harder to find keys when I was playing that Shaman. And like it's not like Shaman was bad, but like I wasn't a good keyer on Shaman. Quickly, and it's a lot worse than my Rogue, so that was, it makes it hard. People will play with you one time on your character, and if you don't like pump that one time, then you're not getting invited anymore on that character, and you need to go back to playing whatever you have got a good impression on. Yeah,
each character has like a history in people's minds,
That's true. Like Tattles' Demon Hunter, for instance. Like no matter how good that character is, I'm still just gonna remember that time we had to hearth out of like a Temple 12 or whatever.
That was a 17, dude.
12 or whatever. Temple 12 or whatever. Yeah.
That was so funny. Dude, your Prot Pally and Melody Shaman were in that group. It was okay, anyways, continuing on.
Trell has a pretty bad reputation. If I wanted to do keys seriously as a boomkin, I'd have to like actually play with a lot of people and prove that I know how to do my job.
Yeah, there's
It's just for fun though.
Mm-hmm. But that dynamic is more of like in the kind of, because we talk about pugging and there's sort of a pugging type thing that happens in the high key. Like you kind of break through the clouds and you reach this like, great area where everybody sort of knows everybody, and there's kind of pugs from within that area, and like you can always find keys in that sort of group.
Yeah.
And in that range, it's a pretty different experience than the pugging in LFG that happens down in the 10s to 15s.
Well, it's reputation based.
Exactly.
It's completely different. I don't look at your Radar IO score whenever I invite you. I know you're not bad, so I'm just like, hey, let's grab the XYZ, and the other people in the group are just like, yeah, let's go.
So that there's the reputation component starts to kick in. If you're interested in pushing higher than that, it starts to be pretty important to like build a reputation. You do get multiple chances with people. Like you can come back a couple months later and be better, and that can help. But
oh, definitely. I see improvement in people all the time.
And actually seeing somebody improve is like, a nice characteristic as well, right? Okay. Cool. So our TLDR, Tettles, as our summarizer here. What would you say are the big takeaways from this episode?
Knowing that LFG is a ladder and trying to climb keys like 1 to 2 levels higher is generally going to be your best bet. If you've done all your 10s, maybe you're applying for 11s and 12s of that dungeon, just trying to slowly move your way up that way. I know it's like after you've done all your 10s, you're like, all right, I want to jump into 15s. You're probably not going to get invited, and it's going to fucking suck. There's no issue with shooting a shot and throwing that Hail Mary there, but realistically, 1 to 2 key levels higher is your best bet.
Yeah.
A lot of problems get introduced when you add more than a couple key levels at a time. Like when you jump from 10 to 15, all of a sudden the wildfires in Tal Dazar, as one example, are going to hurt too much to be completely left alone the whole pull. And then on top of that, like the tank and the healer are more held down by having to just focus on their role specific jobs. And so they can't just like cover mistakes with the group. And usually all these issues are compounded where going up only 1 or 2 levels at a time is the safer bet.
Yeah, and that gives you time to like learn what everything does. Now, a focus on learning how everything works and like learning what you can do and getting better is the biggest thing that you can do to succeed in keys, I'd say. Like having an attitude that's focused on your own improvement and your own knowledge increases is a really, really useful thing to do, because then you like, not only are you going to get better, but you're also going to have an easier time getting invited the better you are. So hard focusing on your own improvement and hard focusing on like what you've learned from each key also means that you're going to be a little bit less sad if you deplete versus timing the key. If your mindset is based on improvement, then it doesn't matter whether you time or deplete the 13 as long as you played as well as you could and learned something new, right? Whereas if you're just looking to like do the 15s as soon as possible, then timing versus not timing that 15 is catastrophic.
And there's something to be said about like there's a bunch of tips that you can take away from dungeons, but by and large the fundamental mechanics of the dungeons are normally going to stay the same, and having a very clear understanding of what needs to be kicked, how the mobs need to be positioned, what order that you're going to do the bosses in sometimes, what is a meta path. Those are always going to be fundamentally some of the things you got to be looking for. And
you do need to be careful with like, if you join an LFG group and you're like, guys, I'm really excited to learn what all the abilities are in here, you're gonna get kicked, right? Like people don't want people like learning in their key or whatever.
Don't tell them. You don't tell them.
Yeah, unless the key says learning group, but that's another different red flag that you probably also want to avoid. So be careful of that. The way to learn these dungeons is like, I think one of the biggest ways is watching streams of people, like watch streams of your spec playing the keys, and you can see what those people are doing and like really try and pay attention to what they can do. And also if you can, like try and think like before they're about to pull something, like, okay, what would I be doing if I was pulling this pull? Like what would I be looking to kick? What would I be looking to stun or whatever? And then see what they do. And those sorts of like actively engaging with the stream you're watching is a really good way to actually learn something instead of just be entertained by it.
So for role-specific stuff, Trell, do you want to talk about tanking, what you should be looking to do as a tank for trying to get your 15s?
I think tanking is pretty straightforward to getting 15s done. First, you just need to know the routes for the week and assume that the routes change weekly this season, because they do, and there's just so many different factors each week, unfortunately. So trying to find like an updated, safe route for 15 is very important. And after that, find a rogue. Honestly, like a tank healer rogue relationship is the biggest thing socially that you can do this expansion for keys. If you know a good rogue and a good healer that you like playing with, that's just the way to get it done. I think if you have a route and a rogue and a healer, you're good to go.
Yeah, it's I would say tank, healer, rogue. Like if you can have that group be solid, you can invite any 2 DPS after that, and it'll be fine. Like those can be different every key, and it's fine. Like a tank and a rogue can do 90% of the work in a lot of dungeons, and a good healer can cover the rest.
Also, to clarify the rogue thing, you don't necessarily need a rogue for 15s. I mean, you actually don't need a rogue at all for 15s, but it just helps a lot if you have access to one. Let's say you have 3 DPS friends that don't like to play rogue, though, then just stick with those friends and figure out how to do it without a rogue. There's always other ways around it that usually take a little bit more time, but you're fine.
Yeah, it's sort of like the being in voice chat versus not being in voice chat thing. Like having a rogue in your group, it's not as important as being in voice chat, but it's in the same sort of universe where it's like, okay, this run is a lot different now that we have a rogue. Okay, as a DPS or a healer, you obviously are in a little bit less of a shot calling role. Although I would say that the more as a healer or DPS that you can take that burden off the tank, the better. So if you are just like a DPS who runs into every pull and is like, I kick this, you kick this, that can make groups a lot more likely to succeed because there's a good chance in Prugs in particular that otherwise just nothing would get called and nothing would get kicked. And often your tank is going to be busy. Like if they're pushing 15s for the first time, they're taking a lot of damage that they're not used to, and they're just going to be busy trying to live. And
yeah, that's very true. Probably a lot more than in high keys, actually. If you can call for your tank, the better in every situation. And they love that. They will notice that instantly and be like, I'm bringing this guy with me on every.
Yeah. That's very, very, very nice. And again, when a key is done, that's your time to. There's a way where, like, okay, the key finishes, 2 minutes pass, people leave the group and start hearthing or whatever. That 2-minute window is when you need to, like, add friends, ask them if they want a key again, like be like, hey, you guys want to go do this key now? Like you have some agency on what happens next and whether you continue playing with that group and whether you continue playing with those people. If you just do nothing, if you AFK for 5 minutes at the end of the dungeon, you are not going to make any progress on that networking front. So that, like, if you think about that as like a game mechanic that you need to get, then that's when to do it. So
what would you recommend for learning routes? Would you just like recommend ripping like your weekly guides?
I think those are not a bad place to start. Yeah, I mean they're like the expert ones, the basic ones. Even they should work for you for pushing 15s. I think both of those even should work for.
All right. So we normally meme about Dratnos' weekly routes, but in all honesty, like if you have no idea what's going on, maybe you actually take those weekly routes and you're just like, okay, so I kind of understand the mechanics of why he's pulling. Maybe we actually try out this route.
And like sometimes I have something stupid in there. Sometimes I pull 2 packs that you cannot pull together accidentally in one of those routes, or like I'm like, okay, yeah, just skip this thing, and it's like there's not actually a way to skip this void or whatever. That's easy, and so those like the routes are not perfect, but like that happens like maybe one route every couple weeks. Like usually they're pretty thoroughly vetted, and I make sure that they are at least going to work, and especially in that 15 range. So. I don't know. People do come into my stream and say that they kick people who link my routes sometimes, though. So, you got to be careful of that. That might be another thing that gets you kicked from a group. I've heard that you can get kicked for not being a blood elf also. So those are all things that you got to look out for.
If you're not blood elf and KR, then maybe.
There's just a million little things that can go wrong and you get kicked in LFG.
One moment. Speaking of which, Dratnos, you need to make that rogue blood elf again. That needs to stop being controlled.
It was never a blood elf. It used to be an orc, man.
All right, well, the thing needs to be a blood elf.
I want to make it an orc again. The orc shoulder pad size is really favorable to me.
Oh man, Dratnos.
Yeah.
Anyways,
the Mog is much better. It's much better on an orc. Maybe I'll go blood elf though. I don't know. There's some cool blood elf Mogs.
Last 2 points of our TLDR: be ready for wipes and mistakes due to someone not having the knowledge you have, and explain like why you wiped after the fact, so maybe people can actually learn in case they care. I would avoid saying it in a condescending manner. However, sometimes that is the way it'll come off, especially if you're trying to tell people why they made a mistake.
On the flip side, I would try and like dissociate from your mindset that like it's your responsibility what your group knows, and that like your job is to teach your group. Like those are not things that you're responsible for, and worrying about what other people can, like you fundamentally are not able to control what other people do. Like you can call things and try and have them do stuff, but at the end of the day, you don't get to push their buttons. So don't worry about that part of the game. Like, worry about your skill and your actions and what you could have done better. And sometimes that is a communication thing. Like, sometimes communication is what you could have done better. But often I'll come out of keys and be like, okay, this, that person couldn't do this thing, and that's not, my thing to worry about. And it was not my job to like type out for 10 minutes explaining exactly what they're supposed to do. And like, even if you try to do that to people, they're not going to be receptive all that often. Trying to like brute force knowledge into somebody's brain is not. There are a few people in the world who like enjoy getting taught what to do, but most people don't actually like getting told what to do when they haven't asked for it. So, I'd stay away from trying to do that.
Yeah.
Okay, I guess the big final point is just patience and persistence are important characteristics here. If you just keep at it, it's going to get better. It's going to be something you can do. Everybody does deplete keys. Hard weeks are harder than easy weeks. So, you come in after
Hold on.
You come in after a push week and you're doing keys at the same level. They're going to be harder than they were the week before. So that's worth noting as well. Like that, the number associated with the key, especially in low keys, like the weeks where bursting necrotic week on a 12 is probably way harder in most groups than the good weeks are on 14. Like those affixes are dramatically noticeable in those groups, and so don't be frustrated by having a harder time keying on those bad weeks.
This just in. Water is wet.
Look, it's an easy thing to say, but people get frustrated and they're like, why are we depleting? It's just and then they say a number, but it's not just a number, it's also the week.
It is a good thing to notice. And a lot of times I notice in my own chat on Twitch is that people don't think that Void Week is such a big factor in how hard the keys are. And I'd say Void is actually the hardest affix of any affixes on the key. So when it comes to that, look at the Beguiling rotation first for difficulty, to be honest.
Yeah, that may not be true in 15s though. Like I don't know. I don't know whether Void Week is the big like thing that it is in like in 23s. Void is totally the worst pattern, but jamming 15s, I kind of think that Tides is the one that comes into play the most in 15s.
Hey, Dratnos, I just put something at the bottom of our show notes.
Yeah, we should look at that.
Yeah, okay.
You want to pull up that website?
Let's do it.
That's a good one.
Okay, so this is bestkeystone.com. This is a nice one to kind of evaluate the weeks, right? Here it is. Excuse me. Okay. Sorry. So we have this website, bestkeystone.com. I'll put it in chat as well here, Twitch chat, and I'll try and remember to put it in the descriptions too, but it's a simple URL, bestkeystone.com. This will show you which dungeons are good each week. So for instance, this week looks like Waycrest is actually being succeeded a lot. That's so weird on
that is kind of crazy.
Sanguine Quaking. Toldagor at the bottom, not surprising. Toldagor awful on Sanguine Quaking.
Sanguine and Quaking and Void are hard. And
I'd say Void is actually one of the ones where Toldagor is Toldagor I feel is more Void intensive on Tides Week than it is on Void Week.
Yeah,
but it's certainly not
one still though.
It's not as good as it is in Enchanted Week for sure. And then dungeons like Siege and Motherlode, like these are tough ones on Sanguine. Dungeons like Temple, that's really rough on Void. Shrine, kind of awful, kind of equally awful with all these things active. But you can compare this to like other weeks, right? If you go back to Bolstering, Skittish, Fortified, right? You can see what sorts of dungeons are good here, and all of a sudden here it's like Underrot. Oh, Temple is great all of a sudden. Success rate here is on Temple, it was 80% that week compared to this week when it's 46%. So you can see there's a huge difference in success rate on these keys based on which week is currently active. Yeah.
Average score also kind of matters too. It kind of lets you know what week you can actually do the highest level, depending on what the average score will be, because that's taking like from Raider.io score, like the points per dungeon. I don't know what a 15 is, but for like 21s and 22s, we're getting like 250 points per. So just like looking at the average score too, you can kind of tell when are good weeks to maybe push for that 15 as well.
Yeah. And we talk about how Fortified is a lot easier than Tyrannical in high keys, but in 15 range, they're both totally doable. Like they're both, I think the Tyrannical scaling thing really only starts to come into play above the like 20 range. And if you actually look here at the weeks that have had the highest success rates, a lot of them are Tyrannical weeks, like the Tyrannical Bursting Skittish week. Was a really good week for a lot of these dungeons. in the kind of general universe, not just the super low keys. So,
also a point that Squishy just mentioned in 15s that I think Tyrannical is easier.
Yeah,
fight, huh?
Yeah, because the bosses are tankable and survivable, and the trash is a lot easier, and the trash is what kills you. So
yeah,
I would agree with that.
Learning mechanics on Tyrannical, all the trash mechanics, is probably the way to go. Especially if you're getting into 15 and then higher afterwards. It's probably a much better way to learn is on Tyrannical weeks.
Another cool resource, this one not super relevant for 15s, but if you are interested in pushing higher than 15 at some point, here's a useful website you might be interested in, justhealus.com. This is like Trance's website.
Yes.
It is a great tool for like, okay, say you're a rogue, you click on this little rogue button, you're an outlaw rogue, and you can put in how much stam and all verse and stuff you have, and then you can go like, okay, freehold, how much damage am I going to take on a 13 Tyrannical from Azurite Powder Shot? Okay, 224k. How about on a 20? Okay, 437k, that's a lot, that's going to kill me. Like, maybe I need to do something to survive this, so, how about if I faint? Okay, if I faint, it's down to 262k, so I can live that. This is a really, really great website for figuring out what you can survive, and you can even plug in your exact stamina, verse, armor, and avoidance, and it can tell you exactly how much damage these things are going to do to you. So,
that seems like that's a bit skewed for people who are looking to push well beyond 15s.
Not something
though, right?
like what the thing that this can tell you in 15s is that you are not going to get one shot by these abilities. Like, there are not one shot abilities in 15s, right? Powder shot here is getting close. Powder shot here on Tyrannical 15, 310k. That's fairly close to one shotty.
Okay, shit. Maybe this game actually does suck.
Well,
if you get hit by the poop and then also shot.
Well, okay, powder shot is different than the Azurite powder shot. Yeah, the Sky Captain Crags one is only 271k, but Eudora is doing 310. Yeah.
Eudora one is
smash, and then you get hit by powder shot, you're dead.
Yeah.
Eudora one is physical. It's mitigated by armor.
That's true.
The Azurite powder shot's fire damage. It's not.
Mm-hmm. So it depends. Like if you're clothy against this, might be bad times. But yeah, it seems like you're not going to get one shot by stuff in 15s. But if you are interested in bringing this to, if you're interested in starting to do 18s or 19s, this is the sort of resource you can look at and be like, all right, we are doing this key at a level where we're going to need a plan other than topping people really quick after their shot. So, like, people are going to get one shot, so we need a plan. So that's a cool website if your aspiration is to go even beyond 15, which we hope it is. It's really fun to do high keys. Okay, let's move on to our questions and answers. Our Q&A segment. Lenoxus from Discord asks, what's your opinion about optimizing your DPS to be noticed and making new friends versus maximizing chances of timing the key? When playing with serious group, it's obvious to take the option that saves the time. What to do when you're trying to climb the ladder and make friends/consistent group? So this is a kind of an interesting question. Like, should you pad in a low key so that your damage is higher, so that you make more friends? I think that the answer here is probably like if you can pad to do big damage, I think you can probably do pretty close to that much damage and also be being effective. Like, who are you trying to impress here? Who is it that you're like? Are you in just a key with some really high key person all of a sudden, and you're trying to impress them by padding really hard? Like, that person's gonna know if you're padding, right? They're gonna see that you've taken Fel Barrage, right?
But they're not going to understand the ramifications of me spamming Hibernate on a Feral Blood Swarmer, but they will notice the fact that I'm doing 0 damage to the pad. I don't know, man. I'm pretty sure you actually just go ham and pad the whole entire time.
Certainly,
it depends on who you want to impress.
Hold on, you staff the last boss of Underrot. Fuck that.
Oh man,
I don't know.
I see that. I remove you from my range list.
It depends. It just depends on, like, I think that it's probably better to just always play to win. I think that trying to, like, be fancy about it and, like, pad strategically to get invited more often it may work in some specific short-term cases, but it seems like the kind of thing that you're going to shoot yourself in the foot with. Like, I think just, like, doing a fancy Hibernate spam is likely to, like, if you actually happen to be in a key with somebody really good, they're going to notice the Hibernate spam, and they will also notice you choosing not to do that and taking, like, Lunar Shrapnel and Starfalling or whatever.
That's a damage loss.
I don't know. Whatever you can do to pad is boomy.
To take damage sacrifices in these situations to impress certain people and tell them that you're doing that. So, like, the tank might not know that you're taking the responsibility off the healer, for example, by running over to the enchanted emissary as a rogue and knocking it for a little bit while the healer needs to heal the tank. And if you notice that needs to happen, you could go do that, but just say, I'll handle the emissary. My damage might be a little lower, you know?
Yeah, I do this. I just call it like my enchanted, my assassin, like my whatever, and then just do that, you know, mob mechanic for as long as you can. But
of course, that in mind, doing top damage is obviously the easiest way to get recognized as a good player, quote unquote. So yeah, finding a good balance is important.
So, question: do you hit the enchanted emissary or do you DPS the pack? That is, I guess, the critical one.
Yeah,
I think you hit the enchanted emissary.
You hit the emissary.
Well, I had the fucking enchanted emissary because I'm doing a 22. But if you're doing a 15, you're trying to build your network here. I mean, I don't know, man. Maybe you hit the pack.
You just cloak and hit the pack, even with the enchanted emissary in there, and you're just fine. Like, you know, what's it gonna do? You're immune to magic damage. Like, yeah, free. Play rogue and hit both. That's true. Yeah, you can just turn on your blade flurry and actually hit everything. Definitely a useful thing to do. Okay, Zomboy from Discord asks, how important is overall damage as a metrics to one importance in a group as DPS? Should we strive to maximize overall damage above all else without wiping or healing trash? And what differentiates a 55k overall DPS rogue versus a 35k one given similar gear? So
we hit some of this already.
We did, but this is a different question, right? This is a question of like, what is actually the goal? Like, what is the good thing to do? The good thing to do is not to maximize your overall damage. Like, overall damage is a metric that often shows who's contributing the most to the dungeon. But if you are fighting 10 droplets that each have 100k health and a boss that has 1,000,000 health, and you kill all the droplets and the boss, and you do 100k damage to everything, right? Like, you use your staff on that, right? You're going to show up huge on the overall damage meter, but you're going to be doing less effective damage than somebody who just does 200k to the boss, and, you know, the ads slowly get cleaved down, right?
So I don't staff the conscripts.
Exactly, like staffing, you know, it's doing huge AoE pad staffing on initiates, conscripts, spores, you know, those sorts of things will look good on your overall damage numbers, but that's not effective to timing the dungeon. Like, sometimes stuff needs to die early, but generally the most effective metric for damage is like, damage should be done at a ratio based on target's health, right? So like, if there's a mob that has twice as much damage as the other mobs in the pack, usually the fastest way to time the key is to do twice as much damage to that mob as other mobs in the pack. And if your ratio of damage is different than that, then you are not getting 100% damage effectiveness, and your overall damage is going to be distorted and look bigger than it should be in terms of how fast you're killing the dungeon.
It's definitely complicated and it's super situational, right? Like, padding on the conscripts, like Tuttle said, if your strat is to die to the conscripts and skip all combat with the Orb Guardians, then padding on the conscripts is absolutely pointless. But if your strat included killing the Orb Guardians, then maybe it's good because your staff will also hit the Orb Guardians.
If you like, there can be mobs that you're going to kill. Like, if your plan is to kill the conscripts, then it's good to kill the conscripts. But if you're the person who does all the killing of the conscripts and that shows up as 20k damage overall on the meters, that's not how much it was worth, right? Like, it was worth less than that.
Okay. So a couple points I want to make. Sure. First off, staffing, somebody had a question about it. It is the new Ashara staff, and it stacks up across the whole entire dungeon. And basically, once you either drop below 10% health or 10% mana, it procs and does an insane amount of damage. And you can just proc it conveniently with mana as most ranged DPS, whether it uses like Spell Steal or like Mass Dispel or Mass Spell Empowered Shields or like heals or whatever else. That staff is really OP, but if you're proccing it on stuff like conscripts, then that's effective damage that you're just like losing that you'd rather be using somewhere else or whatever, right?
Yeah, so even when trash needs to die, like, you don't need to like do all the damage to them, right? That's not that may save you like 3 seconds of killing the conscripts or whatever, and that damage would have saved you more than 3 seconds later in the dungeon. So overall damage is you know, generally the people who have higher overall damage, it's better than being lower overall damage. Like, if you can do something to improve your overall damage without changing how you're doing damage throughout the dungeon, that's going to be better. But often there are also ways that you can change how you do damage throughout the dungeon that might even lower your overall damage, that will speed up how you get through the dungeon.
Okay, so differentiate 55k overall DPS rogue and a 35k one. I don't know if this necessarily is as applicable to DPS because I feel like the delta is not going to normally be that high. What about a 20? What about a 20k DPS Resto Druid versus a 10k DPS Resto Druid?
So I think those are pretty different things because like a healer doing good healer damage, like versus a DPS player missing that much damage, like are two completely different things. Let's start with the rogue case, and then I'll do the healer case because like there are definitely cases where just like DPS players are better at pushing their buttons. They're like a lot better at managing their cooldowns. They're playing a better build, and they're just doing their job more effectively. They're doing their rotation correctly, and that can easily be 30% more damage than somebody else at that spec. They're even just like as an outlaw rogue, like managing your blade flurries and your blood of the enemy windows and having those be on big AoE versus on small targets and having it be at the right times, like will be huge amounts of damage over the course of a dungeon. So if you're seeing a rogue way lower on that damage, like maybe they're just doing those things badly. That's likely to be the case compared to the 55k damage rogue.
So. If it's that big of a disparity, I think so for sure.
Yeah. Now, if you might be in a group where there's a 55k DPS rogue and a 50k DPS rogue, and maybe the 50k DPS rogue is the one who's doing all the emissaries or something, or like maybe that rogue has 100 gouge casts in the dungeon and the other rogue has 0. Like those are definitely things that could be true. And when it's that close, it's possible that the better rogue is the one who's lower on damage. Like that could be true. But 20k damage, not a reasonable amount less to be doing while you're and be like, hey, I'm doing mechanics. Now, as a healer, doing 20k DPS versus 10k DPS, like you have to be really optimizing to be doing huge amounts of damage as a healer. Like getting over 10k range, like now we're talking about more than Sunfire and a couple of swipes here and there. So like you're probably that healer is probably playing like the Aquapotent Nautilus trinket or something, and they're like maximizing its damage, or they're playing like
triple undulating.
Yeah, they're doing that kind of stuff to get big damage. Likely that healer probably has like a tank that's fairly safe. Although even then, like even with the same tank, a healer that's focused on damage and really good can do way more damage than another healer and both of them can keep the target alive. Like that is a huge skill testing component of healing, and it's not something that's talked about very much. But I've played with people who like. I've been doing these like I do high keys with people, and sometimes like just everybody in the group is taking damage. We all need to be getting healed, and we are getting healed, and also the healer is doing 25k DPS, and I'm like, how are they doing that? But sometimes there are people who can do it. With Resto Druid in particular, like they can do their healing even before people take damage, and then they can be doing damage when people are and have people being healed by their hots. So that's like a pretty OP thing about that spec. They can do pre-hots before the pull, and then they can just be doing damage for 30 seconds. But a lot of healer specs do have ways to do high damage. Okay.
I think it's important to know sometimes I actually need Jam and my own Mythic Plus group to DPS less so that the group gets more overall damage. And these are maybe just high key problems, but if he's in cap form and I need if I could use a few more heals to stay in the pack longer as a tank to keep the pack completely still for DPS to maximize their own more, it's absolutely worth it.
I would say that is a very nuanced problem, but like the fundamental core of what he's explaining is making sure that the pack is like grouped up.
Yeah,
he doesn't need to like rop and run away, and then the pack gets like spread, and less efficient cleave is going to be had and stuff like that.
So like a healer global that keeps Trell from having to kite is worth a lot of damage that does not show up on the DPS meters under that healer.
Right, it will not be the rest of Druid's damage, but the group will gain a lot more damage. I think regardless of comp, it gains quite a bit of damage by the pack not moving.
I mean, yeah, just if people have Purification Protocol minor, like that wants everything to be stacked up, and that's a good minor that a lot of specs have. So
yeah.
All right, we have a question from Twitter at Same Tweet here, who asks, could you give some extra spotlight on how to do that as a non-meta spec? I've seen enhancement shamans being removed from +13 for being enhancement shamans. We did cover this, that like there's no way to not get removed from LFG as an enhancement shaman when you're applying to groups. Like there's really not a good way to the way to not get kicked from groups as an enhancement shaman is to whisper the group leader when you apply and be like, I'm an enhancement shaman, and just not get invited if they would have kicked you. There's not a good way to avoid like being one of these super non-meta specs and having an easy time LFGing. So the way to do this, like getting into keys thing as a non-meta spec, is you're trying to move from LFG to a network in a much faster way. Like that, the network is a really important goal if you're trying to do this as a non-meta spec.
Agreed.
No matter,
I had to build my own network in Legion as a Brewmaster main because I didn't play the flavor of the month tank spec, and at that time Blood DK. I only played Brewmaster, and I had to make my own network of friends, and I got up to doing pretty high keys in the end, but it did take me longer.
Yeah, I mean it can be done, but it is not through the group finder. Like there's no. The only time you'll get invited is if you're like applying and your item level is huge and your Raider IO score is huge, and they're like, okay, we'll invite this person, but like. If you're doing this process of getting up to those points as a non-meta spec, it's going to be really hard to do it through the group finder. So it needs to be through guild and network.
I would say that guild is like really important overall, just because you have typically similarly minded people who want to do content at a similar level as you, and whether that be 15s, 20s, or whatever. A lot of the times, the people in your guild, you can just ask them to come do keys with you. You set up the group, set up the time that people show up, and then you just slam some keys for a couple hours and have a good time.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a way easier way to do it for sure. Okay, Never Nude in chat asks, can you guys give your thoughts on pull size and pulling stuff into a boss affecting overall? Yeah, overall damage, like if you compare 2 Shrine of the Storm runs and Tettles did it in 30 pulls, pulling each pack by itself, and like pulling bosses by themselves, and I did it in 13 pulls, pulling stuff onto each boss. Like my groups is just gonna have way higher overall damage because we were fighting more targets at once throughout the dungeon. So like, yeah, a factor that affects overall damage is just the average number of targets you're fighting at any given time throughout the dungeon. And that's part of the reason that overall damage gets higher in higher keys, is because to time a higher key, you have the same timer and you need to do more damage in the same amount of time. So we start pulling bigger because we need to. Or we start doing more effective damage.
Overall damage is a skewed metric, and you can only compare overall between the 3 classes that are in your, like the 3 DPS classes that are actually inside of your group. You can't compare it between 2 separate runs because there's so many differentiating factors. Like, did the pack get spread? Like, what trash are you pulling into bosses? Like, a lot of the times, even if you are doing the same route, stuff like the pack getting spread a little bit early, the tank having to kite more. Just how you're layering your CC, just a bunch of just very small things adds up for what can be 5k DPS, right?
Some other DPS dying in the pull and you having to do a lot more damage than you normally would, something like that.
Having to hit the Enchanted Emissary?
Yeah.
Yeah, there are factors like even that will distort trying to compare the overall damage between the 3 specs in your run. It's not a metric that you should be using to like. It's part of the story. It's not something you should be using to try and tell the whole story ever. Sure. It is comparing your overall between runs, like, you know, there are useful things that you can glean from that, but it's not something that like you should use very much for. Yeah, I'd say generally people take way too much information from the overall damage metric rather than too little.
I would 100% agree with that, and in general, you can't even compare your own damage because like. At the end of the key, you'll know if you played it well. Like, especially if you are very cerebral with like what's going on inside of like the dungeons. At the end of the key, you will know. Like, oh wait, I just owned that dungeon, and overall damage may or may not reflect that. It may not always reflect that. Okay,
we have a question. I think this misconception may be fairly common because I've seen it a couple times from Lionel Hutz in chat. How does Raider IO determine scores for M+? Is it purely overall DPS? That is not how it works at all. The Raider IO score does not look at all about anything that happened. They just see what keystone level was it and what time did you do the dungeon in, and the score is based on those 2 things only. So it's like you get a big bump if you complete it in time versus not being in time, and outside of that, it's just every couple of seconds is based on how much time there was in there. There's no like the Raider IO has no information about how much damage people did in each key. That's not like. None of the info you see on the Raider IO site is based on damage numbers or anything.
Right.
It's all based on just what like dungeon runs based on time and keystone level. Those are the informations they do have.
I think it goes keystone level first and then time second.
Keystone level is usually like in order to get the same key from 2 different keystone levels, there has to be a pretty big time difference in the 2 keys. Yeah. Okay. Rizzy Main in chat asks, so what do Trell and Tettles think of the best emote on Twitch? And then they linked my new Dratno Ayaya emote. What do you guys think of this one?
Please no.
I think it's so bad, but I needed the clickbait for our Twitter today, so I used it.
It's a good. I don't know. I think it's a good emote. I'm you know. The AI, I think it's really coming together here on this in my stream. I got some good ones brewing. You guys should make AI emotes as well.
Oh man,
dude! If only we should make an emote series, like all three of us on our channels, of us just trying to make a triangle. And then like if you had all 3 subs to all 3 of our channels, you could like put them together so that it makes a triangle.
That would be,
that'd be pretty good.
Yeah, if anybody in chat is like smart enough to help us make those emotes, hit me up.
I can. I just need to think about how to do it.
Okay, all right, nice. We'll set this up. We'll set this up.
You might be backwards.
Yeah, can Trells be wrong? Okay, that would be really funny, actually.
Control backwards.
Trell could just like gate his one doing it the right way behind the like tier 3 sub.
God damn it.
Yeah, and then just like most people only put it with him doing it the wrong way.
I do need more emotes. I got a bunch of slots now.
Ooh, yeah, the old partner boom and emotes. Okay. Anyways, we've strayed a little bit of field from our original topic, but I think that's going to be about it for us this week. Hope you've enjoyed this episode on doing 15s. Submit us, talk to us in Discord if there's stuff you feel like we missed, and we can maybe do a little bit of an addendum next week if there's big questions that remain unanswered. If you're somebody who wanted to hear about this topic and there's still something you're curious about. If you did enjoy the episode, though, if you're enjoying the podcast, one big thing you can do to help us out is throw us a review on iTunes. That'll help more people get access to the show, and that's something we would like very much. So big appreciates to anybody who has given us reviews on iTunes. That's going to be all for us this week, though. We'll see you next week for more Titanforge podcast.
Thanks for watching.
Later.